And now, coming to you live from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California, it's the Sheena Metal Experience with your host, Sheena Metal, only on KGRA Digital Broadcasting.
Hi, and welcome to the Sheena Metal Experience on KGRA Digital Broadcast Network. I'm your host, Sheena Metal. I'm a psychic medium. I'm an energetic healer. I'm an interfaith minister. I'm a 29-year talk radio host in Los Angeles and beyond. I'm a creative and a performing artist, and I come to you live from my home in Southern California every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. This show is about spirituality. It's about creativity. It's about humanity. It's about passion. It's about service. It's really about becoming and then maintaining being your best you in this big, beautiful world. And more importantly, inspiring others to do the same. And it may be my show. It is the Sheena Metal Experience after all, but that doesn't mean it's not always and forever your experience. My guest today is a wonderfully talented professor. She's also a philanthropist involved in so many wonderful things happening around Southern California and all around the world. And an honor to have her here on the show. Please welcome the wonderful Karyl Ketchum is here. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you. It's a joy to have you. And I've wanted to have you for, actually, I co-host a show called Between the Sheets, and you were a guest there, and it was one of the very rare shows that I missed. So I felt like I missed out on you. And afterwards, the host, my friend Gayan Bruno, who's been here, was like, "Oh, she talked about so many great things you would have loved." And I was like, "Trats." So now you're here.
Great. Happy to be here. And Gayan is a good friend of mine too.
She's a love, and I've known her for a very, very long time. And I think that sometimes we underestimate in our lives and all the struggles and the strife and all the things we worry about, the importance of tribe. And I really believe that it's really our creative tribe, our spiritual tribe, our friends that get us through everything. And so when you find a good one, you hang on.
That's right. She is a good one. She's a good one.
So tell me a little bit about you and what you're feeling. I love the word passion, and I love service. And I know you have a lot of service that you do, things you're involved in. A lot of people, come on the show and they're worried, or they want to talk about the things in the world that are troubling them or worrying them. What are you feeling passionate about right now? What are you putting a lot of your own spiritual and emotional energy and time into?
There's a couple projects, that I'm feeling really passionate about. I guess I would have to mention the election, because so much of what I do as a professor at a public university is connected to public funding, is connected to elections. And so many of the causes I care deeply about are under attack right now in our country as we slide backwards into some kind of really troubling sort of stereotypical understandings of each other. So that would be my number one thing that I'm concerned about right now. I also have a granddaughter, a 3-year-old granddaughter, who is absolutely delicious. And I want a world where she is safe and happy and can thrive.
Yes.
And as a gay woman, it feels, like a really dire time. As a professor, I'm also the department chair of Women and Gender Studies and Queer Studies at California State University, Fullerton. And California State University, Fullerton is the biggest public university in the state of California. And we're one of 23 campuses. So that makes us the biggest public university system in our country. And we're getting ready to go on strike because of sort of all of the chaos. Doesn't it seem that way? Like ever since, I don't know, the 2016 election or something, it just seems, and then COVID, it just seems like this kind of chaos has ensued. And I keep thinking, it's going to be over. In fact, I keep telling my kids this and my students this, it's going to, we're just going to get through this election. We're just going to get through the COVID. You're just going to, and here we are still dealing with utter insanity in so many ways. So, I'm passionate about the upcoming election. I'm passionate about the strike, and I'm passionate about higher education and the direction that we are going as a country. I take rather personally, because as a professor, I feel like part of the problem we are having is that somehow our systems of education have let down so many of the people in our country, and they're just not able to think critically about things. And I'm deeply, deeply concerned about that. I mean, when we have someone running for president who started an insurrection, who is on record as saying incredibly racist and misogynist things, and yet he's our front runner in one of our parties, one of our two major parties, we're in trouble. So I'm very concerned about that. And then I'm very, very passionate, finally, and I think this is one of the things that we were meant to talk about today. I'm very passionate about the work that I do out in the Coachella Valley and throughout Southern California, actually, because DAP is now a really huge health organization. We have actually 25 health campuses in Southern California. So I'm really passionate about that work too. And DAP is a very unique organization with a marvelous history, an important history for the LGBTQIA plus community, a very important history. It is a historic organization, and it's an organization that was founded on the idea of taking care of stigmatized populations when no one else would take care of these populations. And by that, I mean the HIV community. So when our gay brothers were dying and suffering and experiencing incredible rejection and oppression, and even our federal government refused to help them, there were 4 men out in the desert, out in Palm Springs, who got together, as the story goes, and said, we will take care of people. We have got to start doing something. And together, these 4 men started DAP Health, which at that point was called the Desert AIDS Project. And that's maybe what people kind of recognize more than that name, more than DAP Health. So the Desert AIDS Project took in many men and saved many, many men's lives. And even for those men whose lives they were unable to save, they still provided a kind of safety net, a family, a community that took care of them, and provided kind of wraparound services and food and care. So many of the people that were involved across the country in that work were also women in the lesbian community. So I think it's important for us to kind of to make a note of that. But from there, DAP expanded as treatment for HIV. Thank all things good, became better and better, and our brothers are living longer, and they're living lives where they're almost untouched by the condition of HIV and AIDS. And even though the stigma sort of still exists, it's not anything like what it was under the Reagan administration, for example, when Reagan refused to acknowledge HIV and how it was killing just so many beautiful young men. And from this kind of new incarnation, if you will, of DAP, which is still very connected to the gay men's community, the HIV community, the LGBTQIA plus community, but now also DAP Health, with the acquisition of Borrego Health, DAP is now treating 26,000 women and 28,000 children that otherwise wouldn't have health care. No one, if you don't qualify for any kind of health insurance, you're still not gonna pay for healthcare at DAP Health. And it's like an incredibly exciting time there, because the acquisition was finalized. I think it was the beginning of August, this past August. And it was like overnight, we inherited these clinics. And overnight, we went from an organization that had traditionally been serving primarily the LGBTQ plus community to one that was serving primarily under-resourced women of color and their children, right? And their grandchildren. That's also another important, like in the data that we got on who are our patients now, there is plenty of kind of that generation that's taking care of both their children and their grandchildren. And these kinds of extended family situations and financial arrangements were even exacerbated or became more common as a result of COVID, when the labor market changed so dramatically and many people lost their jobs, and those jobs kind of never remanifested after the pandemic. If we can even say we're done with the pandemic, I'm not sure yet. I'm
not sure either. No,
I'm almost afraid to like put that
No.
into words, I'll jinx it or something. But yeah, so it's a brand new organization out in the desert, and there's a lot of work to be done in terms of educating our community about what DAP is doing, and why this work is important, and also in terms of raising money for the clinics that we've inherited from Borrego Health. It's really a pretty unfortunate story, actually, because Borrego Health went into forced bankruptcy because of mishandling of funds.
Mm.
And so one of the things that we found, and I know this firsthand because I walked into this clinic myself, is that the family clinic, for example, in Palm Springs, which is right now our biggest need, the family clinic in Palm Springs, though they've been renting the building for a long time and at quite a Borrego Health, and at quite a high rate is my understanding, that it was never finished out. So they were renting the whole floor, this whole section of the second floor of this building that was right kind of centralized in Palm Springs, between Indian Canyon and Palm Canyon. And though Borrego Health was renting that building, they didn't put the money into it to finish it out so it could become a fully functioning family clinic. And when I walked through it, it was definitely not fully functioning. I mean, even the smell was impressive because they didn't have proper plumbing put in on the toilet fixtures. And so it was just outrageous. And yet this beautiful, heroic staff of primarily women were working out of this tiny little office and seeing patients in one room and going back and forth, while the rest of this big facility just remained kind of, raw and unimproved. And they're just doing what they can with what they've got. And this is the people that we inherited when we got Borrego Health. We inherited real angels, people that have been doing this work for underserved communities in Southern California, even though the funds were getting less and less, even though the resources were getting less and less over the years. They stayed there, helping their communities, working with their communities. Again, these are communities that otherwise wouldn't have healthcare, wouldn't be able to afford healthcare, but because of being federally qualified health centers, these places received federal money in order to serve these communities. And even though the money began to go away, they stayed and worked and did the best to take care of these women and children. And so it's just such an honor, first of all, to have met the caseworkers and the nurse practitioners and the doctors that are now part of DAP Health that were formerly part of Borrego. And that was an amazing experience, actually we spent an afternoon with the caseworkers, and it was absolutely unforgettable to hear the stories of what they have been doing for their clients and what it means to be living in poverty in a place like, Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley, where there's tremendous wealth, right? Like unbelievable wealth, and unbelievable generosity, I might add. But Borrego Health did not have the kind of system that DAP set up, which is a system where DAP has a community they're connected with that donate time and money and other resources. And Borrego didn't have that. It was very kind of isolated. And I think that the more that was happening in terms of the funding not going where it should have gone, that the board of directors and the other folks at Borrego Health began to withdraw even further, become even further isolated from community. So now we are working with the Borrego Health employees that we've inherited to create these community connections, to hear their stories, to hear the stories of their clients. And it's an incredibly exciting time to be on the DAP Health Board of Directors. I feel just incredibly honored to be doing this work.
That's so awesome, so beautiful, and it's true. I mean, and it's so beautiful that it all started with everyone coming together during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, which
yes.
I was talking to a client of mine who's probably 15 years younger than me. So I'm 56, so probably 40, who has just started watching Fellow Traveler on Showtime. And half of our session became him asking me questions about, did you know anybody who died from AIDS? And, you know, you don't think about the fact that anybody wouldn't just know, because we viscerally live through it with so many of our friends. But it's amazing to me that it's sort of like people have forgotten about it. And well, that's not a thing anymore. Now it's you take a drug and you're undetectable. And they forget what it was like when people were literally dropping dead in front of you, and the government was doing nothing, and there was no help and no support for them. And I love what you said about women coming together. There were so many women, right, both straight and gay and otherwise, that really went to the aid of these guys that no one was helping, and provided all kinds of support. And I think that's so important for a lot of reasons. First of all, I think that we're sort of culturalized in our world that it's like men against women. And I hate that. And I think even in the queer community, it's like, well, you know, gays don't like lesbians, and we don't want men here. We don't want women here. I think that hopefully as we're evolving as humans, we're getting into a place where we're realizing we're all in this together as one human family, and we're all here to help whoever needs help. And it's nothing's not just, oh, that's just a woman's thing, or I don't have to worry about that because that's that's a gay person's thing. No. And so I love the story that during the AIDS epidemic, it was really all the members of the queer rainbow, all the letters that came together when so many people were dying, and so many straight allies, many of whom were women, who came to help, and who still work for organizations that help folks with HIV and AIDS. And that's, I love stories of unity. So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, because I think a lot of people don't know those things, don't know that the government wasn't acknowledging, wasn't helping.
Oh my gosh,
and,
yes.
and that is something that is not a new story. It was new to HIV and AIDS, but it's not a new story where people are continually in our world falling through the healthcare cracks because they don't have this money, or they don't have this job, or they're not this kind of white, straight Christian person. And I think it's one of the biggest problems in our world in general, and especially in our country, that people are not getting the health care that they need.
Yes, it's absolutely true. And, you know, I your comment points to the problem of history, right? That as LGBTQ people, our history has not been recorded. You know, it's representations like Fellow Travelers, which I am on episode 3 right now and just absolutely loving it. Yes. It is, and gorgeous, like aesthetically, it is just absolutely a stunner. Right. Yes. And I'm so grateful that it's getting the kind of acclaim that it's getting, because so I'm the Department of Women and Gender Studies, but we also have a queer studies minor. So we end up getting quite a few folks in our classes that identify as under the LGBTQIA plus blah, blah, blah umbrella. And it is extremely common. And I'm hoping that Fellow Travelers, I'm crossing my fingers that Fellow Travelers will do the work of changing this, but it is extremely common, the norm, in fact, that these students, even if they identify as in some way queer, that they don't know this history. They don't. Yes. I mean, you know, PrEP is here. They don't think about it. They can't imagine it. When you tell them the story, when you tell them what happened, like they almost don't believe you, you know, because there are similarities to what's happening in, you know, with other stigmatized populations, but the degree to which men were dying while the federal government looked the other way is truly, in the wealthiest country, in the most privileged country in the world, is truly unprecedented. I mean, and I want to make an argument that connects the HIV/AIDS epidemic, right, to what's happening with women's healthcare right now. I can't quite do it because the horror of that, these beautiful young men with their Kaposi sarcoma, and just the torture of it, being rejected by having to come out both as being HIV positive and being gay to their families, at the same time, and then experiencing that rejection. This was unprecedented. There's nothing that's happened like this before.
Absolutely. It was a Holocaust. It was a kind of
Yeah.
Holocaust. And I'm a minister at the founders branch of the Metropolitan Community Church. And I saw in our church through the COVID epidemic, so many folks of that age, especially the generation older than us, right? So triggered when COVID started, because it was like, for them, it was like AIDS all over again. And it was horrifying for them. And so I don't even think I viscerally understood how bad it was until I saw the reactions of these older folks that went through it really as adults, because I was still a teenager when it started, but who were like in their 30s when it started, and lost, so many friends, sometimes almost all of their friends, until they felt that coming again with COVID. And I think there's a similarity even with COVID, not to get too political on you, although I don't think you care if I do. But
I'm all about that. Are you kidding?
There was this attitude during the HIV/AIDS epidemic that as long as it was just gays, then as long as it was just IV drug users, who cared? And it wasn't really until the straight lady spoke at the Republican convention, who was a friend of Reagan's, that suddenly it was like, oh, like a
and Ryan White, the Ryan White story too.
White,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But I even think that to a lesser degree, only because I think sometimes we think people who are ill or have different abilities are also kind of disposable. And I think we saw it again with COVID. I'm watching this biopic on BritBox. I do love my BritBox. It's called This England, and it's a biopic of the Boris Johnson prime ministership, but also it's really a story about COVID kind of starting as he first got into office. And it's this, we're right at the point in it now wherever they're deciding, well, who are we going to give the respirators to and who doesn't get them? And I think that's a thing, right? That COVID also, our old people disposable, our sick people disposable, our poor people disposable. And like you said, this is a human problem that is like on a deeply cultural, sociological, and spiritual level, that we consider some people to be more disposable than others. And we really see that when we're in crisis. And when we are in crisis, what we should be doing is rushing to lift up those that need more help, not say like, well, you know what, you're 70. How many more years do you have? You don't need this respirator. And I believe spiritually, and I talk about this in my spiritual services a lot as a minister, that these lessons are shown to us for us to see again and again. We're being told we're one human family. We need to stop this. It's about everybody. It's about the everybody. It's not just about the few. It's about everybody. But I think it's taking us a while to get it. And I think if anything good ever comes out of something like these epidemics, maybe it's hopefully that we see that what we see in someone else's story could also be ours.
Beautiful.
And,
Beautiful.
And also, as horrific as the AIDS epidemic was, it gave a face to a lot of the queer community. It pulled the queer community out from under the rock that it was, for many reasons, hiding under. And it gave a lot of credibility to the community. People couldn't ignore us all anymore. And I think that out of every tragic thing comes something. After every storm, there's a rainbow, right? And I think that was our rainbow, that they couldn't pretend we didn't exist anymore, or that we all belonged in mental hospitals, as we see in Fellow Traveler, right? And you're right, it's such a beautiful show in the sense that it's a beautiful time, and the clothes are beautiful, and people are so well-mannered. But then under that, there is this whole level of, it was a beautiful time if you fit into the mold. But if you didn't, it was a terrifying time. Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many thoughts in my head in regard to all that you just said. I mean, one of them, I don't know if he'll ever watch this program. I'm going to refer him to it. But my very, very dear friend, Tom Peterson, who I've known for many, many years. My university is in Orange County, and Tom was in Orange County. And then we ended up both moving out to the desert in the last couple of years. But he used to, he lived through that epidemic, and he was also a professor at USC, and my dear friend. And I used to have, in order for my students to understand what HIV meant, I would have Tom come and talk to them. And I would just give over an entire class period to Tom. And he would talk in first person about watching lover after lover and friend after friend just die. And he would show a clip from a film, and I can't remember what the film is, but in the clip, it has a man dying of HIV, and then he's like in heaven, and all his friends are there, and it was just, Tom is an amazing speaker, and it's really the only way that I found was Tom was my secret weapon. He is still my secret weapon. The only way that I found to help my students understand just like how catastrophic this was to have, Tom there talking in first person about this. And, I use the word catastrophic there really purposefully, because now I think about, the history of DAP, formerly the Desert AIDS Project, and now what DAP is doing in Southern California, which is taking care of what is now this incredibly stigmatized population. Our tourist economy out in the Coachella Valley runs on the backs of these women. These are the women that are making your beds. These are the women that are cleaning the restaurants. These are the women that are out in agricultural fields. Many of them are undocumented. Many of them are unhoused, living in abandoned hotels. The stories are intense. Many of them have children. Many of them are taking care of children and grandchildren, as I already mentioned. And so what I have come to understand about the living conditions that these women are in is that like there's a level of precarity, like physical precarity related to their body, right? Physical precarity that is really difficult for folks like you and I to kind of wrap our minds around. And how this ends up manifesting is, and I'm calling these things catastrophic cascades, right? So one thing goes wrong in their lives, and there's this catastrophic cascade of effects that like a domino thing that happens as a result of that. For one example, they don't have the money for a car seat. They have a child, or suddenly they're taking care of a grandchild and they don't have a car seat. That car seat is not a medical need, right? We can't use federally provided healthcare dollars to buy a car seat for moms and grandmothers who are needing to transport their kids to a doctor's appointment or need to get to the doctors themselves. We can't use that money for that. And if they don't have that car seat, they don't get an Uber, they don't get a taxi, they don't get, they don't get to those doctor's appointments either for themselves or for their children. So that's an example of this kind of cascade of effects. Or another one, that one of the caseworkers at our Cathedral City Clinic, Centro Medico, shared with us in the afternoon that we went and spent with them. Another one is shoes. If you don't have adequate shoes when it's cold in the desert, or when it's raining in the desert, if you don't have adequate shoes, that starts that cascade of things, right? And it's not just the physical discomfort of not having adequate shoes, it's the embarrassment. It's the shame of that. And, the fact that we have mothers with children that are living under these conditions right next to the incredible wealth that we do just feels, at first it felt really like criminal to me, and I felt kind of hopeless about it. And then I realized the problem is not that people don't care. The problem is there's this disconnect between groups of people, like people in this group that would, want to help in a variety of ways, don't know about what's happening with these catastrophic cascades that end up with mothers and children that are their neighbors, that are cleaning their homes, that are, they don't understand how these cascades work. And just even making those connections between these two groups of people is powerful. And that is what the Women of Impact group, which I should have used I should have named that group in the beginning of our talk here. But the Women of Impact is an organization that is under the DAP Health umbrella. It is the idea behind Women of Impact is that women and men who care for women and children are going to do what they can to bridge that disconnect between these different populations so we can begin to take care of each other, right? And like part of this is completely selfish on my part. Right now I'm working and I'm years away from retiring, but I bought a place out in the desert, and I intend when I retire to live in that place out in the desert. And I want to create the community I'm going to retire in. I want it to be a community that takes care of everybody. And I think that the desert is a unique place in that way, because there's so much love and caring out there anyway. There's so much philanthropy out there. There's so many people who have led amazing, interesting lives. And I just think that we have an opportunity to create another model. DAP, the Desert AIDS Project, created a model back then, in the 80s, and with the stigmatized population, the HIV population. They created a model. We need another model now. The data on this is overwhelming. Women's healthcare is all but ignored by this sort of the larger healthcare system. Women's bodies, when drug trials are happening, or when other treatment trials or investigations into disease are happening, traditionally the medical establishment has not wanted to use women in these studies, because it was thought their bodies, women are just like men with extra stuff going on. That was kind of the thinking.
Right.
Right. Their bodies are too unruly and out of control. They have these hormones that are going, and they're,
Right.
there's messy bleeding every month. And, it's just too much. It's too much. So we'll just do all our treatment plans and our studies on male bodies. And then we'll just, take those results and apply it to women, because women are just sort of messy men anyway. Well, what we're finding out is that's not true. One of the most interesting data points on this that I have run across was one of my fellow board members and a Women of Impact member, Lori Kibbe, who's quite an amazing philanthropist and general human herself. And she shared with us at one of our meetings that, some information she came across that I think is kind of getting out right now, because I'm seeing it on Instagram more, that crash dummies even were not tested with women's bodies. Women's
of course,
bodies,
yeah.
right? They weren't. So because of that, women fare 47% worse than men in an automobile accident.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My new favorite rant is that company Hims and Hers. This is ridiculous, but Hims is all about, oh my God, your penis doesn't work, and oh my God, your hair falling out, it's a tragedy. And Hers is all about, do you have emotional problems? Here's something for your emotional problems.
It's
and I'm
so
like,
true.
Oh, why is it always about like women just have emotional problems? What about our bodies that fall apart all the time? Because we have all these parts that are designed to reproduce. And once we get to the end of the reproducing, they all go kerflooey. But no, it's all about, oh no, a penis stopped working, or someone has a bald spot. But women, you got crazy problems, so hers is going to fix all your crazy. I just think that's so odd. And I feel bad because every time I see those commercials, I laugh and get angry at the same time. But I think that's sort of what we think. Like we're trying to keep men healthy and virile, and we're trying to stop women from being crazy.
Yeah. It's absolutely true, Sheena. Completely, absolutely true. And the difficulty that we are faced here, this kind of bias against women and femininity and women's bodies, right? The biases that we have against the female body, is even encoded in our language.
Yes.
Right? The word hysterical, which you're not going to apply the word hysterical to a man unless you're specifically wanting to feminize him, to take away his masculinity a little bit, right?
Yes.
It's a term that has a gendered component. And if you're not sure if I'm telling you the truth about that, just look at the word. Like it begins with hyster, hyster, like hysterectomy, right?
Yeah.
Because that is the term that refers to the uterus. So to be hysterical and out of control and overly emotional and all of those things
must be a bad uterus.
Yes, is to be female, is to be a woman, identified as a woman. Yes. And I'm being very careful now when I talk to distinguish between being female and being biologically female and being a woman, because they're different, related, but different kinds of things. But anyway, it's we have a lot we're going to be working against here. But we
Yes.
also have a community that has a history of caring for the most vulnerable and the most stigmatized among us. And we are leveraging that history here in the Valley to create this new model of healthcare that really prioritizes women and their children. And which reminds me of one other little phrase that I really love to use when I'm talking about this, and that is, there are two kinds of people in the world, women and their children.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Women and their children.
Well, and you must see, and you must hope as a gender studies professor that you're bringing up the next generations to not have these same archaic binary understandings of what gender is, and to not base everything that we do culturally, sociologically, spiritually, politically, intellectually around gender, when gender is really just, it's a thing, and it's also a thing that has fluidity like everything else. And
brilliant. Yes, brilliant. And I'll say that in terms of what I'm doing, working with students and what we do in my department and on my campus and in academia, working with students, there's actually not a lot to be done. I am very happy to be the bearer of extremely good news when it comes to the younger generation. And that is that they are very smart, very caring. They understand the world. The problem is not this younger generation. The problem is the older generation. That's
absolutely.
the problem.
100%.
And yeah, and my students now, I actually even had to change sort of what I used to do as an introductory kind of lesson, because students come in knowing this stuff now.
Yes.
This is part of their experience. And it's really, it's what we really need to be doing is informing kind of the older generation about how gender works. So you're right, gender is not a binary. And one of the easiest examples I can give to folks to understand what we mean when we say that is that, for example, gender expression, right? The way in which we manipulate the signs and the symbols related to masculinity and femininity in order to send a message to people in the world about who you are, right? So I put lip color on today, and I've got my hair done, and I'm wearing earrings, right? So I'm clearly signaling to everybody out there that I identify through femininity. Yes, but this is a social construct. I mean, it's not natural. The way that femininity and masculinity are symbolized now on and through the body has not always been this way. It changes across time, meaning history, and it changes across space, meaning from culture to culture. And when something does that, it's, I've just proven it to you. You can't even argue with me about it, that it is a social construct. It's not natural. It's not normal. It's not inevitable. And how scary for someone who gets their power from their masculinity to then be faced with the information that is not an inevitable natural thing. And I'm going to prove it for you right now, just real quick. So gender is a social construct. Gender expression is a social construct because it changes across time. So if you wanted to symbolize your masculinity and that you're the kind of badass man in the room at the meeting in France in like the 17th century, you would come to the meeting wearing high heels, a ruffled collar, a blouse, a skirt, something very much like pantyhose, and makeup and a wig. And then you would be signifying, the fancier you were, you would be telling everyone in the room that because I'm the fanciest guy in the room with my dress and my heels, I'm the badass guy in the room, right?
And the
changes across history.
The pinker and more delicate your satin was. Like,
yes,
if you were really fancy, you could afford the satin and the silks, and you wore pink and peach and lavender because you were really a macho badass.
Yes. And that is not the case now. If you show up in the meeting like that now, you're not going to be read as the badass guy in the room. And then the same thing. So we've proven it, right? Historically, across time, history, gender changes. Okay. So what about space from culture to culture? All we need to do is to kind of look at the Middle East right now. And we see these pictures all the time on our television screen. If you're in the Middle East and you want to signify your power, your masculinity in the Middle East, you're going to wear something that we in Southern California might call a maxi dress and a veil, right?
Yeah.
A long gown and a veil, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have proven it. Gender expression, gender changes, the way gender identity works changes across time and space. It's a social construct. When you point that out to people and they are reliant on their gender expression for them to get the kind of privilege that they expect in the world, it's really scary. And so what are they going to do? They're going to shore that up as fast as they can. They're going to make you, they're going to punish you. They're going to say trans kids can't use the bathroom at school. They can't be on these teams. You know, it's all being done out of fear.
Absolutely.
And the answer to fear is education. That I truly believe it. I mean, I'm an educator, so it's not a big surprise, but I really believe that the answer to fear is that fear is just a plea for better information.
Well, and fear, you know, I love the expression, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Fear really is the devil. Fear is the enemy.
Yeah.
All these people that think the other is the enemy, their own fear is the enemy. So what's going on inside of them, and the fear and the anxiety that they can't release, that's really the evil that they are seeing in someone else.
Right.
And I said, you know, I moved back to Orange County a couple of years ago to live in my childhood home. I don't know why, but I'm loving it. And I swore I would never come back here. I ran away from Orange County as a young person in my 20s and bought a house in the San Fernando Valley because of the politics and the religion here. But now that I work as a spiritual person, and that's a lot of my life now, I feel like this area needs me. There are people down here who are trying to open up politically and culturally and spiritually, and they need people down here to help them, so that it isn't just like you talked about at the beginning of the show, this weird repetition politically where there are those that just want to keep dragging us back 100 years in time. It's so important that sometimes you're not always preaching to the choir, that you go to an area that needs your help. And sort of part of my ministry is to come here and, you know, and sometimes I drive by my neighbor's house and I see the flag that says you're now in MAGA country. And I think, okay, well, just breathe and keep driving. But there are so many people down here that do think differently and are excited when a shop opens up that sells crystals and aren't just fitting into that stereotype of a lot of white, straight Christian people. And people need to be down here to help an area. You know, Los Angeles takes care of itself. This area that I grew up in, where a woman once came to my house, the boss's wife, before my father threw a Super Bowl party for work, and told my mother that no one was going to come in unless she took her fairies and her dragons down. Now, you tell an Irish lady to put her fairies away and you're taking your life in your hands. But that's what it used to be like here, you know? And so it's so important for me that I don't let my hometown slip back into that. And I think we need to go to the areas and the places and the communities that need the education and need us to tell them, hey, you know what? Wouldn't it be great if we could just all get along? And we've all got our own weird. Pick your weird. We're all different. Pick your different. But I think a lot of it comes from this fear of the gender fluidity, or the balance and power in genders. Women are going to rise up, and you know the gays are going to take everything and turn it into a rainbow, and all these just really bizarre fears that aren't even happening. And I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm part of the intersex community. And I think we sort of stand outside the circle with like a big question mark in our thought bubble, like, well, what do they think of us? But when
you are important, you are such an important part of the learning process, or the unlearning process, if you will, around gender, because people, you know, think that, well, the body is a binary, the body is it, and it absolutely is not. In fact, intersex bodies, which come in many, many different forms, you know, visible characteristics and hormonal characteristics and profiles, and you know, it's not a binary either. You're not physically female or physically male. Absolutely not. It's more common than red hair. I mean, it's really, and Anne Foster Sterling out of Brown University, the very famous biologist, has done some brilliant work on this. And is one of the few people that have actually gone back into the records at Johns Hopkins, for example, and looked at intersex folks and really been able to provide the data that shows us that, intersex folks, just like gay folks, have been here forever. These bodies have been around forever. These identities have been around forever. There's nothing unusual about this at all. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. Actually, that's really powerful information, Sheena, and that the intersex community has a huge role to play in helping the older generation. Again, the younger generation, they don't need our help. They get it. They totally get it.
No,
it's the older generation.
I teach for kids. I teach spirituality, or I used to teach every year at Models of Pride for the LGBT Center.
I did that too. I've been there. Yeah.
And you walk in and these kids, 12, 13 years old, they know everything about you. But I have to explain to my 50-something-year-old friends for the 10th time what it is to be intersex. And for me, interestingly enough, Johns Hopkins was where I first went to Johns Hopkins. We were living in Baltimore before we moved here. And I saw a doctor at Johns Hopkins, and he took a look at what I had going on. And he basically said, it's a birth defect. You'll have to get it fixed before you get married. Don't ever tell anybody about it. And so when I was after I'd had all the surgeries and everything, I was in my early 30s when I discovered I was intersex. And it was because I met another intersex person, Dr. Tiger DeVore, who's amazing.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know
Tiger
him. Yes.
Saved my life.
Yes. I'm not sure that they're still using he pronouns, but yeah.
A very dear soul in my life always. And I kept thinking, what is this magical person? Looks and feels all these ways like I've always felt and never met anybody else who did. And I didn't even put it together. And let me tell you something, my mother, who was so supportive and so wonderful and believed she had given birth to this magic tadpole who was a link in the evolutionary chain, she was so angry at all the people that we had seen who had never once told her what was going on. And there's so many folks out there that don't even know. My joke is always that I'm the head of the Intersex Coalition for Founders MCC. Then I always say, but don't get too excited, because right now it's just me. Because either there are no intersex people in our congregation, or they're not talking about it, or they honestly don't know. Which is just don't know.
That's true. They don't know. They absolutely don't know. And Ann Foster Sterling's work has kind of documented that. I mean, there's some people that will never know that they'll live their whole lives. They will never know that they don't neatly fit into the binary category of physically male or physically female. It'll not affect them. They'll never know it. And which is why she's very clear to say, and why she went into the historical record, getting data on this, getting accurate data on this is really just kind of impossible.
It's hard. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I'm more happy to be female than I ever was, since I realized why it was okay that I felt different. And I wear makeup and earrings and do my hair like every day. And I'm such a girl. And then that confuses people. Like, well, how can that be? Like, I have to be this sort of, genderless neutral person, which chromosomally and spiritually, I absolutely 100% am. I understand that I'm a genderless being, and I think that's beautiful. But from a sociological and cultural perspective, I was raised as a girl. I love being a girl. I'm happy to be a girl. And that kind of blows everyone's mind too, that I'm not sort of wandering around bald like a space alien, refusing to have anything but gender neutrality. It doesn't work like that. You can be anything you want to be. And I think we need to stop putting pressure on people. You know what? A 5-year-old boy wants to wear a skirt to school. Fantastic. Look, again, I'm Irish. Those men are macho and they wear pants, but whenever it's a big occasion or a wedding, you put your kilt on. So I just don't understand this idea that we have to come down on kids just trying to express themselves and just be whoever they want to be. And, when I was a kid, I was a tomboy and I climbed trees and I played sports and then I was in high school and I loved my prom dresses. Like you just decide what you want to be, and nobody has to tell you, and you don't have to stick to one thing. You can like something one year and something another year. Nobody tells you what color your curtains have to be. Why are people telling you how you have to express your own body and mind and soul? It's always kind of blown me away. And I feel like that's really my work. Every intersex person, I think, has their own ministry, their own mission. And I think that's really mine, is the whole, well, if I'm like this, then guess what? You can be however you want to be. Isn't that fantastic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
I
so
love
much
that.
fun.
Every intersex person has a minute. I mean, every intersex
Yeah,
person does. Yeah. I mean, we all do, I guess, don't we? We all
we
have
all
a
do. We all
obligation
do.
to the world
We all do.
that we live in to try to leave it a little bit better for having been here. But yeah, that's beautiful, Sheena. That's really beautiful.
Absolutely. You're an absolute joy, and I love this, and we should do this again. I would like it.
I would like it too. Yes, I would like it too. Really a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much
For
for
me too.
having
Where
me.
can people find out about DAP, find out about you? Where can people go and click some links?
So DAP Health is where you'll go, and if you go to their website, you'll see if you click on the drop down menu about us, you'll see a Women of Impact link. You can go there to join Women of Impact if you'd like to, and come to one of our events. We give every month, we're giving tours of our Cathedral City clinic, the Central Medico, and where you'll meet patients that that we are taking care of, and meet the caseworkers that are angels, and just it's the most meaningful night you could ever imagine. It's nothing like I've ever experienced, and it's not a fundraiser. It's not. No one's going to ask anyone for money. It's just about making that connection. Again, my belief that this is our desert community is a really unique place where people care a great deal about others, and they're marvelous humanitarians and philanthropists out there, and all those folks that care don't know about these folks that are living like this and that are their neighbors. So it's just about making that connection, right? So you can also reach out to me directly at Cal State Fullerton. If you'll go to the California State University Fullerton website, you can get to my faculty page, and it has a phone number and my email address there. And my name is spelled so unusually, Karyl, that if you put Karyl Ketchum, there actually is another Karyl Ketchum spelled the same way. She's in Michigan. It's very weird. But anyway, my name comes up first. And I also have a book out that comes up. Sometimes it's for educators, about creating classroom spaces that are gender neutral or gender affirming, gender expansive, for LGBTQ plus people, but also for women who want to be powerful in their bodies, who don't fit into the normativity of femininity, right? Where do those girls go? What about the boys that want to do ballet or dance or sing or be part of the arts, or where did those boys go? So it's about all of our children. And so I would direct you to that too, if you're looking for more information.
Thank you for being here, my friend. And then if you missed any of those links, you can see, you can find me at sheenametalspiritual.com. I'm happy to pass anything on. Thank you to my wonderful guest, Karyl Ketchum, and thank you to the KGRA Digital Broadcast Network, and my fantastic engineer and producer, Emery, who is the wind beneath my wings. Until I see you next week, seek peace, live in love, lead with kindness, embrace unity, always work to raise your vibration, and most importantly, know that you are love and you are loved, and you're so loved by me. I'm Sheena Metal. This is the Sheena Metal Experience, and I'll see you next week. Stay beautiful till I see you.